Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Today, we're going to make a real Southern Italian dish, orecchiette with kale. Actually, it should be orecchiette with Cavalo Nero or with turnip tops, but in the spirit of real Italians, we make do with what we have. I couldn't find any of those things in the store, and so consequently, I found organic kale, and that's what we're going to use. It's the fastest pasta dish that you will ever make because it's done. By the time you put the pasta in and the pasta is ready, the dish is finished. In fact, you put the water on and then you can start your preparations for the sauce or for the condimenti. Before I show you how that's all done, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, hit the bell button so you know when I release another video, share with your friends. After all, sharing is caring. And leave a comment down below. I really appreciate it when you do that. It shows engagement with the channel and it helps me, I guess, with the algorithm. I'm not really sure how it works. I just try to provide you with the best possible content I can provide you with. All right, enough said. Without any further ado, let's get into the kitchen and make this seriously Southern Italian dish, orecchiette, in this case, with kale. All right, let's get started. For our orecchiette with kale, we're going to use a little bit of California extra virgin olive oil. We'll use an anchovy. We'll use some crushed red pepper and a garlic clove. Obviously, we need orecchiette and our kale. Now, this was originally supposed to be Cavalo Nero, and a good substitute for Cavalo Nero would be mustard greens or turnip greens, but for the life of me, I couldn't find any. So, in the Italian tradition, when you don't have something, you make do with what you do have, and so we're using kale. Now, the kale has to be trimmed. As you can see here, I have taken the leaves and I've peeled them away from the tough stalks. We don't want any of this. This is really pretty tough. Even though the kale has to be cooked, you don't want these things in the finished dish. A little bit of a refinement. So it takes a little bit of time and literally cuts your yield in half. So be prepared for that when you buy the kale. And we're going to finish with a little bit of Pecorino-Romano. So if you wanted to remove the anchovies, which I don't suggest you do, you would have a vegetarian dish. And if you remove the anchovies and change the cheese, you'd have a vegan dish. Again, I don't condone that practice because these things, very, very simple, very few ingredients. They cook very quickly, and to remove one and replace the ingredient with something else would be to basically damage the dish the way that it's been done in the poor kitchen for, I don't know, over 100 years. Anyway, let's get to cooking. All right, first things first. We put a pot of water on to boil. Before we do anything with regard to the ingredients, the water has to come to a boil because we're going to cook the pasta and the kale in the same water. They'll be done at the same time, and so for that reason, we have to be cognizant of the time. We are going to add salt into this water. There's exactly 12 cups, so we'll be adding 6 teaspoons of water when this comes to the boil, and we'll cover it. That way it ensures it comes to the boil a lot faster. All right, we'll be back when this comes to a boil. All right, now that our water is boiled, or is boiling, we're going to add our salt. We'll give that a couple of seconds to melt and distribute into the water, and then we are going to add our orecchiette. We haven't even started the sauce yet, believe it or not, but that's all right. Our orecchiette goes in, and in about 5 minutes we will be adding our kale. That's why it's so important. The orecchiette is going to come out at about 1 minute before it's al dente. So this takes about 11 minutes to cook. And we're going to say it's going to come out at 10 minutes. And we need about 5 minutes for our kale to cook. So at the 5 minute mark, we'll put our kale in. and then everything will come out together into our pan. So while this is going and while we're waiting for the time to pass, the 5 minutes before we put the kale in, let's start with our sauce. All right, it's been 5 minutes. We're now going to add our kale into the pot that we're cooking our pasta in. So they'll be ready literally at the same time. We're going to cook the kale for approximately 4 to 5 minutes to really get it nice and soft and to cook it. And because the water has salt, it will get seasoned as well. So we will then, actually right now, turn our attention to making the sauce. And nothing could be simpler, as you'll soon see. All right, we are about 2 minutes away from our pasta and our kale being ready. And so now it's time to make the condimenti, or the sauce. And I have a pan over relatively high heat. We're going to add in a nice amount of olive oil. And very simply, we will add our anchovy into the oil. We're going to let the anchovy melt into the oil, and then we'll add our garlic and hot pepper flakes. I'll be right back. All right, as you can see, our anchovy and a half about, is melting into our oil, not our butter. I don't know why I say butter. And now we're going to add our garlic in there. We're going to mix this around. I'm going to add some hot pepper flakes, just like that. And these 3 ingredients alone, along with a little Pecorino-Romano, are the basics for Southern Italian cookery. We'll turn this down all the way. In fact, I'm going to turn it off. And we'll turn it back on when we add in our pasta, because what we don't want is the garlic to burn. But the residual heat will soften the garlic and make it a little bit golden until our pasta and kale is ready. Look how thinly sliced those pieces are. So they'll literally also melt into the sauce in just a few minutes. All right, I'll be back when it's time to put the kale and the pasta, the orecchiette, in the pan. All right, we brought our condimenti, our sauce, up to temperature. It's now time to put the orecchiette and the kale in the pan. You can see how little is left of the kale. And you can see that the residual water sticks to everything, and so consequently there's really going to be no need to add any extra water into our pan to create the sauce. We'll now move this around a little bit and finish cooking the orecchiette and let the water get absorbed into the pasta. And some of it, of course, is going to evaporate with the residual heat. It will create a temporary emulsion with the water and the oil in the pan. All right, I'll be back when this is a little bit further along. We have maybe another minute or so before the pasta is perfectly done. All right, we're almost there. Let me give this a little bit of a taste and adjust for seasoning. The pasta is perfectly done. I'm now going to give it a little bit of a benediction in the Italian way. And it's time to dish it up. Hello, my Italian food fanatics. So, you saw me dish it up. You saw me put that pecorino romano on top of there. And now it's time to eat our orecchiette and kale. Now, this is originally supposed to have been done with Cavalo Nero or turnip tops or turnip greens, or even purple broccoli would work. Now, I looked all over. I couldn't find turnip greens. I couldn't find mustard greens. I couldn't find Cavalo Nero. Nothing. For whatever reason. I have no idea why. So I did what a Southern Italian would do. We make do with what we have. I saw they had some organic kale, and I said, okay, let's use kale in place of it. So I'd like you to know that it doesn't matter what green. You could use spinach, for example, and it would still theoretically have that same taste and feel. Although, I will say this, kale is a very bitter green, and far more bitter than any of the others that I've mentioned. And so you have to be prepared for that. But kale is part of our diet these days. Back when I started in the kitchens, kale was a garnish. You just throw the stuff away. It was junk. Nobody ever thought to eat kale. But in our in our lifestyles today, where we're more conscious about our health, we realize, wow, the benefits of eating kale are fantastic, because it is a green, leafy vegetable, and consequently, it's good for you, even though it's a little bit bitter. Wow, that's definitely Southern Italian. The pecorino hits you right off the bat. Of course, that was on top. The pasta is perfectly cooked. The kale and the pasta is seasoned excellently, right? There's a chewiness to it. There's a little bit of bitterness. The benediction of the oil there at the end was perfect. It adds that rawness of extra virgin olive oil that we all love. It's a little bit heat. There's a little heat in there from the red peppers. And of course you can taste the anchovies and the garlic. It doesn't get more Southern Italian than this. And it doesn't get more poor cucina povera than this either. In fact, believe it or not, to this day in Italy, you can drive by and there's fields with arugula. People stop by and they pick those greens. They don't go out and buy them. They'll grow wild. They pick them up off of the side of the road, bring them home and cook them up. Now, I gotta be honest, kale is not my favorite green in the entire world. In fact, I was very disappointed when I went and purchased this. I thought, I've had kale, I'm not a big fan. But I tell you what, for something a little bit different, for something off the beaten path, this really hits the spot. I'm quite surprised and I'm quite delighted as well. So, I suggest that you give this a try, no matter what greens you want to use. You could use, like I said, spinach, and maybe even add a little bit of lemon juice on there, and that would taste good as well. Or you could keep it real and only do it with Cavalo Nero, or turnip greens too. Those two would really, really work well. But this is something else. Again, a little bit off the beaten path, a little bit bitter, but great nonetheless to have as a side dish or as a small pasta course. Be phenomenal. Anyway, before I go and finish this bowl, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe. It should be right up there. Now hit the bell button. Share with your friends. You know why? Because sharing is caring. And leave a comment down below. I appreciate your time and leaving those comments. If I've inspired you to make a dish that you saw on my channel and you have made it, take a picture, send it to me on social media, on Instagram at Chef Argenti, and I'm happy to feature you and your dish in a future episode of Italian Food Fanatics. So, without further ado, let me finish this bowl of pasta. Wherever you are in the world, I want to thank you very much for watching my channel and for following me along on social media. I wish you good health, happiness, and prosperity. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.